Imagine creating a trilogy of games so successful that they snowballed into a cultural phenomenon, where everyone in the world lines up for the midnight launches and has turned your main protagonist into an icon of popular entertainment. Then the latest of your games has been regarded as one of the best video games of all time, and still has an online player base in the millions years after launch. Imagine trying to decide what to do next. How do you follow up Halo 3? And now really try to imagine having the balls to say, but this time, no Master Chief. This, ladies and gentlemen, is how Halo Reach did the impossible. Starting at the very beginning, Bungie knew going into development of Halo Reach that this was their last hurrah with the series. For some time before that point, Bungie was rife with ideas for new IPs and ideas they wanted to experiment with. One of those being the later independently released Destiny. But with pressure from Microsoft to keep the Halo games coming, they felt creatively stunted. So after Halo Reach, they would leave the Microsoft umbrella and work on a new IP as an independent studio. And this dynamic certainly had a big impact on what kind of game Halo Reach would be. With a well-performing proof of concept with the Halo ODST spin-off game, that being a somewhat squad-based game featuring an emotional narrative through the lens of an orbital drop shock trooper, Bungie decided that its big send-off would be a prequel to their original Halo game, Halo Combat Evolved, following a similar format of telling an emotional story through a group of Spartans as the planet Reach falls under siege to the Covenant. It's the presentation and story told here and the circumstances that surround the game's production that makes what Bungie was able to pull off here truly special. It's easier to see now, but even looking back, people were highly committed to this franchise and to what they felt made it special. People wanted more of the same, with the same gradual ramping up of features and epicness that Bungie had done so masterfully in their main trilogy. And very naturally, I bet, fans assumed that it would involve continuing the saga of the Master Chief, Halo's instantly recognizable mascot. But Bungie wasn't looking to play this one safe, and I think it paid off. Bungie chose to put the player into their own Spartan, something players had only imagined doing through the multiplayer with previous color and armor customizations. Bungie took this approach and applied it to Halo Reach's main character, a strong, somewhat silent canvas for the player to assume. This honestly is a great way to make a Halo game, because originally that's what Master Chief was meant to be. A power fantasy of taking control of an armored super soldier fighting against an onslaught against humanity by a ruthless alien faction. And this is an apt description of really any of the Bungie games with the exception of kind of ODST. Reach fully completed the immersion by having the character mostly unvoiced and completely customizable to the player and allowing those sweet armor and color combos to be seen in the cutscenes. This was a great evolution on the formula the original games followed. Rather than connecting with Chief Cortana and the accompanying chain of command, Reach connects your unique Spartan with a fire team of pretty badass Spartans. The story is primarily driven through this connection with the supporting cast. I'm going to assume most of you watching know what happens in Halo Reach. The planet slowly falls to the Covenant despite all of the epic, heroic, and desperate attempts of Noble Team. Along the way, the situation grows continually dire and depressing as the planet crumbles and the members of your team die one by one. This combination of a unique Spartan and an interesting cast of characters that all lose their lives to this useless cause really resonated with players, resulting in Halo Reach being a common favorite as people's favorite narrative in a Bungie game. And my personal connection to Halo Reach is a little unlike most, where their attachment to this game stems from the powerful narrative. And I would assume that at least some people felt that after playing a few years of Halo 3's multiplayer, for reasons we'll get into in a bit, felt that Halo Reach's multiplayer was a slight step back. For me, Halo Reach was my first introduction to Xbox Live. It was around this time that I was learning about the internet and the fact that my original Xbox and PS2 had these Ethernet ports on the back. I remember one time in my grandparents' house, I hooked up a phone line, not an Ethernet cable, to my Xbox, hoping I could connect to the internet. But it was around the time I got my hands on Halo Reach, a buddy and I finally figured out what type of cord we needed and where it went on the internet modem to get my brand new Xbox 360 connected to the internet. After creating the Xbox Live account and gamertag that I still use today, the first game we fired up was Halo Reach. For that, Halo Reach will always have a special place in my gaming journey. So now let's dig into what made this first jump into Xbox Live so much fun. Beginning with all the game modes, nothing was sacrificed here compared to Halo 3. Halo Reach was the first to use the season-style arena mode that we still see in Halo's ranked modes today, where during a season you rank up as high as you possibly can. Then at the beginning of the next season, it resets all players to work back and try again and see if you could place higher than the season before. On the social side of things, Halo Reach even added new modes such as Juggernaut and Stockpile. It's still pretty depressing that in 2024 we don't see this level of content presented at a game's launch. Looking back at some reviews from this game's launch, it looks to be the only complaint came from a lower number of official multiplayer maps, which it was mentioned in these reviews that Forge appeased this criticism, at least for a little while. This game's feature set at launch is something that this game is remembered fondly for. Halo Reach's Forge was a huge expansion to the mode players got with Halo 3. Now, I'm not much of a forger in Halo games, but with Halo Reach, Forge is probably my second most played mode, mostly due to the amazing blank canvas known as Forge World. Many great Bungie-era Halo memories were made with all the ridiculous custom games played and all of the maps and modes created in Forge. What I have on screen here are some of the save files from my time playing the game in around 2010-11. This Forge upgrade was a great example that it was still possible to make improvements to things that were already great from the original trilogy. Reach also had some of the best progression we've seen in a video game, maybe ever. It was ideal because it had an in-game currency and store that was all earned within game by playing the game. This gave players a reason to play day in and day out as the currency was issued out the more you played. And because a video game won't get past the design stage without a way to monetize the player base after the initial purchase, this system was then monetized with expansion packs, add new maps, and to keep things interesting. I believe this is the best way to keep a player base engaged in your game as you monetize it post-launch. It's not intrusive, gambling adjacent, and doesn't make players feel like the only way to make their character look cool is just bust out the credit card. And if you don't want to spend any money, you're still incentivized to continue playing the game, earning the in-game currency for the cosmetics you might want. You just might get bored of playing the same maps over and over, tempting you to maybe buy a map pack if you're enjoying playing the game enough. Though Halo Reach was not without its downsides. And due to the controversies I'm about to discuss, Halo Reach was not particularly unlike later entries in the series in the way it could spark up some Halo debates. Beginning with some of the issues people had with multiplayer, nobody talking about Reach nowadays fails to bring up how controversial the additions of armor abilities in Bloom were to Halo Reach's multiplayer. And even personally, I'm not a huge fan of the extreme feeling Bloom found within Halo Reach. Though it never stopped me from playing the game and having a good time with it. It was just something to get used to. And armor abilities in general, I didn't think were bad, and just another thing to get used to. Their similarity with Halo 3's equipment made the adjustment pretty easy and non-consequential. Though there's a whole community meme around how frustrating the armor lock ability could be if placed in the wrong, very annoying hands. And I think to Bungie and in the mind of their playtesters, this was a simple replacement for the bubble shield equipment from Halo 3 and was used as such. But then when the game shipped and it was out in the wild, it was abused by players and created the reputation it has today. Personally, I had a ton of fun in Halo Reach's multiplayer, as, again, it was my first online Halo experience, so I'll always remember it for that. I did want to quickly cover some of the negatives from Halo Reach, as the video was mostly about how Bungie's pulled off this amazing game in the least expected way possible. Moving into the single-player side of things, as good as the story is, certain parts are lackluster under scrutiny and the passing of time. For instance, the first few missions that act to build atmosphere end up feeling a lot like filler. Those early missions could have been used more effectively to connect the player with the rest of Noble Team, but to me this is still a bit of a nitpick in an otherwise really good campaign. One final little thing that has always bugged me about Halo Reach was how it felt super inconsistent being a game that butts right up to the beginning of Halo Combat Evolved. There were some weird changes in design and sandbox that always felt weird for me, being a prequel to Halo Combat Evolved that was pretty stripped down. The armor abilities, the jetpacks, some of the Covenant weapons that pop up in this game for the first time, the huge change in assault rifle design. My kid brain could never adjust to this stark difference in the two games, and I felt like some of them were unnecessary, and it always just rubbed me the wrong way playing Halo Reach. I don't know if it did for any of you as well. But once Reach was completed and shipped, Bungie officially handed the reins to the franchise over to Microsoft and the newly created 343 Industries. And those games, well, they didn't quite pull off the impossible the way Halo Reach did. If you want to see my thoughts on Halos 4 and 5, check out the video on the screen now. Thanks for watching.